The ranger thought he'd followed the bear's tracks by accident, until the trail led to the old swing no one spoke of anymore. The bear didn't roar. Didn't run. He just stood there, staring at the swing like it was someone he missed. And when he looked up, something in his eyes made the ranger freeze. Because it wasn't just a memory the bear carried. It was recognition. No one was supposed to go past Timberline Trail after winter set in. That part of Grayson Forest was marked off limits, not because of predators, but because the terrain shifted after a landslide 5 years ago. Trees snapped. Footpaths vanished. The ranger station issued a warning, let that part of the woods rest. And mostly, people did. But 3 mornings in a row, Ranger Elias Cross had found something strange, massive tracks in the snow. Deep, deliberate, looping in and out of the restricted zone. Tracks too wide for a black bear. Too spaced for moose. And they always ended in the same place, before disappearing altogether. Like the creature simply vanished. Elias didn't scare easily. He'd worked this stretch of forest longer than anyone. Served through fires, floods, and one near miss with a cougar at dusk. But these tracks? They gave him a feeling he didn't know how to name. Not fear. Not danger. Memory. Like something he couldn't quite recall. Or maybe something he didn't want to. On the 4th morning, he followed them. The sky was a dull gray canvas, heavy with snow not yet fallen. Every crunch of his boots echoed through the pines. He moved slowly, rifle strapped to his back, not because he expected to shoot, but because the forest demanded respect. The tracks curved toward the western ridge. Through bramble and over ice-slicked stone, deeper than any recent hiker dared to go. He passed a broken fence post half buried in snow, one of the old boundary markers, now forgotten. And then? He saw it. A clearing. Circular. Still. And at its center, a single tree. A tall, wide oak, stripped of most of its leaves but still standing proud against the cold. From one of its lower limbs hung something out of place. A wooden swing. Old. Frayed. Half frozen in the snow. Its ropes groaned softly in the wind. Like a voice trying to speak. But it wasn't the swing that made Elias stop. It was what stood in front of it. A bear. Massive. Thick-furred. Brown so dark it was nearly black. He didn't move. Didn't sniff. Didn't growl. He simply stood, as if he'd been waiting there for hours. Watching the swing. Elias slowly backed behind a tree. His breath caught in his throat. He'd seen bears before, dozens of times. This wasn't normal. This wasn't instinct. This was deliberate. The bear's posture wasn't tense. It was almost reverent. Then the swing creaked again. And the bear lifted his head. Looked directly at Elias. Not startled. Not territorial. Just aware. As if saying, I know you're there. As if he'd been expecting him. Elias didn't move. His radio crackled softly, but he didn't reach for it. He couldn't. Because he couldn't look away from those eyes. They weren't wild. They were familiar. And that's what made his skin crawl. Not from fear. From something deeper. Recognition. But from where? The bear blinked slowly. Then, without a sound, turned and walked back into the trees. Didn't run. Didn't rush. He vanished between 2 snow-heavy trunks like a ghost slipping through a door. Leaving only the swing behind. Still swaying. Elias finally exhaled. It came out shaky. Not because he was cold. Because something about that clearing. He knew it. Back at the station, he dug through old records. Accident logs. Incident reports. Buried deep in a drawer, beneath yellowed maps and outdated permits, he found a file with a name he hadn't heard in years. Lila Fairborn, missing. Winter, 2008. Last seen, near Timberline Trail. Age, 10. Wearing, gray coat, wool mittens, swinging on a rope tied to a tree. Elias sat down hard. He remembered now. He was part of the original search team. The swing had been a landmark. The last place anyone saw her. They never found her. Only her coat. And a bare print in the snow. That night, Elias didn't sleep. Not just from the memory. But because of a feeling he couldn't shake. The look in that bear's eyes wasn't just recognition. It was grief. Elias hadn't opened the Fairborn case file in over 15 years. It had been stored in a weather-warped folder labeled Cold Case, Timberline Trail, with half the pages stuck together from dampness. The ink had faded, and a small dried leaf was still pressed between two sheets, like someone had tried to preserve a moment or a memory. The official report was vague. Lila Fairborn, age 10, disappeared during solo play while family camped near restricted ridge area. Last seen near a wooded swing. Initial search party found child's coat approximately 30 yards from known play area. No sign of struggle. Bear tracks noted nearby. Determined non-aggressive. Back then, Elias had been new to the ranger station. He remembered the way the town reacted, hushed, withdrawn. Everyone pitched in for the search, but few spoke about the bear tracks. Not because they didn't matter, but because they mattered too much. And after a week of combing the snow and coming up empty, the family left. The swing remained. But the trail to it faded. Blocked by warnings. Lost to overgrowth. Until now. Elias stared at the photo clipped to the last page. A girl with messy hair, laughing as she jumped off the swing, frozen in time, cheeks red from winter air, boots slightly too big. Her scarf trailed behind her in the photo like it was caught mid-wave. He hadn't thought about her in years. But that swing? The one in the clearing was the same. Exactly the same. Only older now. He checked the wildlife logs from recent winters. Bear sightings near the western ridge. All identical. Same description, large, dark brown, calm, non-threatening. Same pattern, always in December. Always around the clearing. Always vanishing before anyone got close. The bear had returned every year. To the swing. To the same place. Just like he had yesterday. Elias marked his map, folded it, and packed light. No rifle this time. Just binoculars, his notebook, and a camera. He wasn't hunting. He was witnessing. The next morning, he set out before dawn. The forest felt different now, like each step carried a question. The air was crisp, layered with silence so complete it felt like a sound. Snow fell lightly, blurring the outlines of the trees. He reached the clearing just as the sun began to touch the tops of the pines. And the bear was already there. Not standing this time. Sitting. Still facing the swing. Watching. As if expecting something to return. Or someone. Elias stayed behind the tree line. Didn't move. Didn't speak. He simply watched the bear watch the swing. For almost 30 minutes. Then the bear stood. Walked forward. And nudged the swing with his snout. Just once. Not playfully. Gently. Like greeting an old friend. Elias' chest tightened. He raised the camera slowly. Snapped a photo, the click too quiet to disturb. The bear turned its head slightly. Not toward him. Toward the camera. Almost like he knew it was being seen. Then, slowly, the bear turned away and walked back into the trees again. Same direction. Same calm pace. No fear. No rush. Only routine. That evening, Elias called a name he hadn't spoken in over a decade. Lila's father. Now in his 60s, still living 2 towns over. Ranger Cross, the voice said, surprised. After all this time? I saw the swing again, Elias said. And something else. A long pause. Then a breath. I knew you would, Mr. Fairborn whispered. I always knew someone would. He came to the station the next day. Brought a plastic bin with him, filled with newspaper clippings, drawings, even old maps from the family's camping trip. He showed Elias a drawing Lila made 2 weeks before she vanished. A bear. But not fierce. Not scary. The bear sat beneath a swing, watching. On the back, in pencil, Lila had written, "He waits every winter." That night, Elias sat by the station fire with the file open on his lap. He stared at the photo of the girl. Then at the drawing. Then at his own camera, at the photo of the bear from that morning. Same posture. Same clearing. Same swing. Time had passed. But the story hadn't ended. For 15 years, no one had returned. But he had. The bear. Over and over. And if he was waiting? Then who, or what, was he waiting for? And why hadn't he forgotten? Elias stood and grabbed his jacket. He had to go back. Not with gear. Not with caution. Just with presence. Something had been left behind in that forest. And maybe, just maybe, it still remembered. The snowfall overnight had been soft, steady, the kind that didn't scream its presence but left the whole forest feeling blanketed, muffled, like it was trying to keep secrets warm. Ranger Elias Cross didn't sleep much. Not from restlessness. Not from fear. But from something else entirely. Urgency. The kind of feeling that taps on the inside of your ribs and says, "You need to go back. Now." Before sunrise, he geared up lightly again. Just his coat, gloves, notebook, and camera. No rifle. No backup. The other rangers thought he was crazy, chasing stories from 15 years ago, wandering into restricted zones to stalk a bear that wasn't aggressive and hadn't harmed anyone. But Elias didn't care. This wasn't a patrol. It was something else. Something older than his training manual. The trail back to the clearing was quiet. No wind. No birdsong. No falling branches. Just his boots over fresh powder, and then suddenly, not so fresh. Because halfway down the ridge, the trees opened into a series of footprints. Not paws. Not hooves. Human. Small. Light. Barefoot. Elias stopped cold. The tracks were too small for an adult. And in this weather? Barefoot? He crouched. Touched the edge of one. It hadn't frozen over yet. Which meant they were new. From this morning. He followed them. They led toward the clearing. Winding. Wavering. The gait uneven, like the walker was slow or unsure. And then the swing came into view. So did the bear. But this time, something was different. he wasn't alone. At the base of the swing, nestled in snow, knees tucked into chest, sat a girl. Young. Barefoot. Pale, but not shaking. Her eyes were open. Looking straight at the bear. She didn't seem afraid. She seemed home. Elias stopped at the edge of the trees. The bear hadn't moved. He stood behind the girl, not close, not looming, just there. Like a guardian. Like he'd walked her here. And now, he was waiting. Elias didn't dare speak. Didn't raise his camera. He simply stood still and watched. The girl blinked. She looked up at the swing. Then down at her hands. She was holding something. A strip of red wool. A scarf. Torn. Frayed. Old. Too large for her. Too faded to be new. But unmistakably the one from the Fairborn file. Elias's throat tightened. It couldn't be. This wasn't possible. And yet, there she was. 15 years gone. And still a child. He took a step forward. A branch snapped beneath his boot. The girl turned. Not startled. Not frightened. Her eyes locked with his. Blue. Wide. And familiar. She said nothing. Didn't run. Didn't wave. She just raised one hand slightly. And pointed at the bear. Then, softly, almost too soft to hear, she whispered. He found me again. The bear turned his head toward Elias. Eyes calm. Knowing. And then, without a sound, turned and walked back into the woods. No urgency. No glance back. Just, gone. Elias rushed forward. The girl stood slowly. She wasn't cold, at least not visibly. But she seemed light. Not just in body, but in presence. Like she'd been fading, and only just returned. He crouched beside her. She didn't flinch. Are you? Lila, he asked, voice nearly breaking. She didn't answer. Only handed him the scarf. Then she looked back at the trees and said. He never stopped coming back. Elias wrapped her in his coat. Radioed for medics. Carried her gently through the trees, eyes scanning for paw prints. But there were none. Only hers. As if the bear had vanished the moment she was safe. As if his part was done. That night, she wouldn't speak to the doctors. Or her father. But she drew pictures. Dozens of them. Of the swing. Of the bear. Of the trees. And of herself, always beside him, always small. No one could explain how she looked 10 years old. How she hadn't aged. Where she'd been. Only that she was alive. And she remembered. But most of all, that he remembered her. Elias sat alone on the ranger station steps long after nightfall. He held the scarf in one hand, the drawing in the other. In it, the bear was curled beside the swing. Eyes closed. Snow falling around him. Waiting. And the swing? Still swaying. The hospital room was warm, but the girl barely moved. They said her vitals were fine. No frostbite. No hypothermia. Just mild dehydration and fatigue. Physically, she was healthy. But she wouldn't speak. Not to the nurse. Not to the psychologist. Not even to her father, whose hands trembled every time he touched her. He kept whispering her name over and over. Lila. Lila. Like if he said it enough, time would admit its mistake. Like she'd break into years of words and laughter and explanations. But she didn't. She just stared out the window. At the forest. At the snow. They ran tests. No signs of trauma. No signs of memory loss. But the doctors couldn't explain it either. Her age. She still looked 10. Same height. Same facial structure. Hair a little longer, eyes a little older, but otherwise unchanged. 15 years gone. And untouched by time. Elias came to visit on the second night. He didn't say much. Just sat in the corner and watched. Lila didn't look at him. But she didn't look away either. Eventually, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out her drawing. The one from years ago, the bear beneath the swing. He placed it gently on the table near her bed. Then added the new one. Her most recent sketch. Same swing. Same bear. Same quiet posture. Like a cycle never broken. That's when she finally spoke. Not loud. Not clear. Just a single phrase. He waited every year. Elias straightened. The bear? She nodded. Her voice like wind in tall grass. He never left. Lila's father leaned forward. Where were you, sweetheart? All this time. Lila looked at him, eyes soft. And said something that made both men freeze. I was there. She pointed to the swing. Not gone. Just stayed. With him. The therapist said it was trauma-induced metaphor. That she'd built a fantasy to protect herself during whatever had actually happened. But Elias didn't buy it. Not anymore. Not after what he'd seen. The girl continued. The winter I disappeared, I heard something in the trees. I followed it. It wasn't scary. It was calling. And then I fell. Slid down an old path. I couldn't find my way back. He was there. Watching. I was scared at first, but he never came too close. Just stayed nearby. She said she built a shelter in a hollow between two old trees. She said she survived on berries, on water from snow, on scraps the bear would push toward her, bark, frozen fruit, pieces of fish. She said when she got sick, he curled beside her. Kept her warm. Never growled. Never left. And every winter after that, I dreamed I could go back. And I did. Elias blinked. You mean, in your dreams? She shook her head. No. I was there. In the forest. The swing never changed. Only I did. The doctors called it impossible. Her father just cried. But Elias, he believed her? Because belief didn't need proof anymore. Not after the look in the bear's eyes. Not after the way he touched the swing. Not after the truth the forest kept repeating. That night, Lila asked to go outside. Just for a minute. Just to see the trees. Elias and her father walked her to the edge of the hospital's snow-covered courtyard. She didn't say anything. Just looked into the woods. Closed her eyes. And whispered, "Thank you." The next morning, the swing was gone. Elias returned to the clearing. Where once stood the old oak, now was only a broken stump. Snow blown smooth across the earth. No rope. No seat. No prints. Just stillness. But in the center of the clearing, tied around the stump, was a red scarf. Perfectly folded. He didn't touch it. Just stood there, heart pounding. A moment passed. Then he looked up. And on the ridge above the clearing, just for a second, a shape moved. Massive. Dark. watching, then gone. And Elias knew. The bear hadn't waited for her to return. He waited for her to be ready to leave. Elias didn't sleep that night. He sat on the porch of the ranger station, scarf still folded in his lap, boots unmoved, breath fogging in the frigid air. Above him, the stars blinked like slow pulses. The forest stood silent. Not threatening. Not empty. Just aware. Like a being that breathed through its trees. At dawn, he packed a small satchel, no gear this time. Just the scarf, the map, a pencil, and the 2 drawings. And instead of heading straight back to the swing's clearing, he took the long way, the old hunter's trail that predated the ranger station. The one rarely used, choked with undergrowth, but marked in the town's original 1920s trail plans. He didn't know why he felt pulled there. Only that something in him said. You've only seen part of the story. As he moved deeper into the forest, it began to change. The trees thickened, but not chaotically. They aligned in quiet rows, each taller than the last. Moss grew in patterns, not random splotches, but arcs. Like old pathways being reclaimed. Twice, he stopped, thinking he saw movement. Not from danger. From memory. A shape there, then not. A shadow too slow to be wind. Eventually, he reached the overlook. It wasn't marked on any modern map. But it was there, a rocky ledge looking down at the valley below, partially obscured by snow-covered branches. From this spot, Elias saw the full stretch of the forest, from the ridge where Lila disappeared, to the clearing with the swing, to the streambed winding through the east. And in the middle, where the trees thinned just slightly, he saw a ring. Barely visible. Stone markers arranged in a wide circle. Too perfect to be random. He descended carefully. Hours passed. Light thinned. And when he reached the circle, his breath caught in his throat. There were carvings on the stones. Not modern. Old. Faded by time, but still legible in parts. Bare figures. Children. Stars. A woman standing beside a pawprint. Elias knelt. Ran his hand across the nearest stone. At its base, tucked into a crevice, lay a small bundle wrapped in cloth. He hesitated. Then gently unwrapped it. Inside was a child's mitten, worn, hand-stitched, the name Sophie embroidered in red thread. Next to it, a leaf, dried and perfectly preserved. And beneath that, a sketch. Faded charcoal. Of a bear. Beneath a swing. His chest tightened. This wasn't just Lila's story. This had happened before. Dozens of times, maybe more. He searched the circle, finding more objects tucked between stones. A woolen ribbon. A broken toy horse. A water-warped journal with 3 legible words. He watches kindly. Elias sat in the center of the circle. Not cold. Not frightened. Just quiet. Still. Like the forest wanted him to stay there for a while, to understand. This place wasn't haunted. It wasn't cursed. It was a sanctuary. For those lost, physically, emotionally, or in time. And always, at the center of their stories. A bear. Watching. Waiting. Remembering. That night, Elias returned to the ranger station and pulled every file marked missing persons for the last century. He made a list. Every child. Every winter disappearance. Then cross-referenced the dates with recorded bear sightings. The overlap was startling. Not every case. But many. too many to ignore. And every bear sighting matched the same description. Large. Brown. Non-aggressive. Watches, then retreats. Sometimes reported by hikers. Sometimes by search parties. Sometimes by survivors. And in one case, a faded newspaper clipping from 1972, a headline read, "Girl found after 4 days, says big dog stayed with her." Underneath, a drawing by the child showed a furry creature beside a swing. Again. Elias leaned back in his chair. The forest didn't forget. The bear didn't forget. They carried these stories, tucked in snow, buried in stone, sketched in memory. He looked at Lila's drawing again. Then added his own beneath it. A simple shape. A circle of stones. And in the center, a bear, alone. Watching. The next morning, when Elias returned to the clearing where the swing once stood, he found something new. Not placed. Not left. Grown. From the broken stump, a thin green shoot had emerged, already curled toward the sky, defying the cold. And beside it, half buried in the snow, a smooth rock, marked with a paw print. Fresh. He smiled. Then laid the scarf beside it. Folded. Waiting. Like everything else in that forest. They didn't speak for a long time. Sam stood with his hand resting lightly on the cairn. Clara watched him in silence, her pulse slowly beginning to match the rhythm of the forest around them, slow, sure, unbroken. The snow fell softer here, in long drifting threads, as if the sky itself had been waiting for this moment to unfold. He turned to her and smiled gently. "Do you want to see where I stayed?" Clara nodded. They followed a narrow trail deeper through the trees. Not far, no more than a few minutes. And there, tucked between 2 massive boulders, sat a small cabin. Nothing like the ranger station. This one was built by hand, logs shaped and stacked carefully, moss stuffed between cracks, a roof layered with thick bark and snow. A wooden wind chime hung beside the door, made of bones and antlers. It clinked softly in the breeze, echoing the sound Clara had heard earlier in the spiral clearing. Sam opened the door. Inside, it was warm. A small hearth glowed in the corner, its fire slow but steady. The room was simple, 1 bed, 1 table, a line of hand-drawn sketches pinned across the far wall. Clara stepped in slowly, her breath catching. The drawings were all of the bear. Dozens of them. In different postures, different times of day, different seasons. Sitting. Sleeping. Walking. Watching. Some were made by a child's hand. Others by someone older, more practiced. A life traced by observation. And devotion. "I watched him every day," Sam said softly. "He never left. Not once. Not even when I wanted him to." Clara turned. "Did you ever try to leave?" Sam's gaze lowered. "A few times. When I got older, I'd make it halfway to the lake, and he'd just be there. Sitting. Like he knew I wasn't ready yet. Like he was waiting for me to decide." He paused. "And then, he started waiting for you." Clara's chest tightened. "So all these years, you were safe," Sam said. "Not lost. Not scared. Just away." Clara looked around the cabin again. There were jars of dried herbs on the shelves. Bundled pelts. A rusted old compass. But everything was clean. Cared for. Lived in. "You survived," she whispered. "I remembered," Sam replied. They stepped back outside. The wind had died down. At the edge of the tree line, the bear had returned. Sitting. Still. Waiting. But this time, not for Clara. Not for Sam. He was simply present. Because his promise was almost fulfilled. Sam and Clara walked side by side through the snow. Their boots crunched in unison. The bear stood as they approached. Massive. Regal. Calm. Sam stopped a few feet away. Clara did the same. They didn't speak. But they both knew what came next. Clara stepped forward. Reached out. Pressed a hand gently to the bear's fur. It was coarse. Cold on the outside. Warm beneath. He didn't flinch. Didn't move. He simply accepted the touch. Then he exhaled, a deep, slow breath that shook his entire frame. Sam joined her. Placed a hand over Clara's. Together, for the first time since they were children, they stood side by side, not watching the bear, but witnessing him. And then, the bear turned. Not away. Not to flee. But toward the spiral clearing. He walked with purpose. And they followed. Back through the trees. Back over the frozen creek. Back to the place where memory had waited. When they arrived, the glade was brighter. A shaft of sunlight broke through the overcast sky, landing directly in the spiral's center. The bear walked to it. Stopped. And sat. Clara and Sam stood at the edge, watching. The forest held its breath. And then, from the trees, they emerged. Not people. Not spirits. But shadows of memory. Figures, glimpses of past moments, echoes of laughter, old footsteps. Children running through snow. A younger Sam chasing a fox. A younger Clara drawing in the dirt. Their father tending a fire. Their mother singing near the porch. All of it, for one brief second, real. Drawn to the spiral. Drawn to the bear. Drawn to completion. And then, like breath on a mirror, it faded. Leaving only the snow. And the bear. And the two of them. The bear rose. Clara knew, without being told. This was goodbye. Not death. Not departure. Just the end of his vigil. The promise kept. He turned to face them one last time. Lowered his head. And walked into the woods. No sound. No trail. Just gone. Clara didn't cry. She didn't need to. The forest was no longer holding its breath. And neither was she. Sam looked at her. Now you remember. She nodded. And now I can carry it. They turned together. And walked back, not to the ranger station. Not to the road. But to the beginning. The snow had started to fall harder by the time Elias reached the archives. He had spent the last few nights going through old ranger logs, town records, and even folklore collections from the nearby counties. Most entries had been vague, scattered. But after Lila's return and the strange stillness of the bear's final visit, something compelled him to go deeper. There was something more. The feeling had been gnawing at the edge of his thoughts since he'd first stepped into the stone circle. The bear, its gentleness, its timing, its presence, didn't fit with the laws of wilderness Elias knew. It didn't move like any wild animal. It remembered. And if it remembered, maybe others had remembered it too. In the deepest drawer of the archive room, tucked between crumbling incident reports and flood records from 1894, Elias found a journal. It had no name. No official tag. Just a brown leather cover, cracked and soft at the spine, with a loop of old twine holding it shut. He opened it slowly. Inside were handwritten entries. Slanted cursive. Mostly dates, places, and encounters. Not just ranger notes. Not weather observations. These were stories. One entry stood out. Dated February 2nd, 1911. Saw him again near Hollow Creek. Same eyes. Same walk. Same silence. He stopped by the swing again. Thought it had collapsed last spring. Somehow it still stands. Child missing last winter was found here. Said, the bear sang to her in dreams. Doesn't speak otherwise. I am starting to wonder if he's older than these trees. Another, from 1938. Blizzard hit hard last night. Thought no one would survive out there. He came to the porch of the cabin. Just stood in the snow. Watched through the window. In the morning, a boy was found at the clearing. Wrapped in fur. No footprints nearby. None. Elias flipped faster. Entries stretched back to 1867. One passage, written in a different hand entirely, mentioned a name. Ursa Silens, the silent bear. Said to appear in deepest winter to those who are lost, grieving, or waiting. Not a guardian. Not a ghost. Something between. A memory that walks. Elias sat back. The idea was absurd. And yet, hadn't he seen it? Hadn't Lila? Hadn't generations before them? The bear wasn't random. He came with purpose. When someone was missing. When someone was forgotten. Maybe he wasn't there to save people. Maybe he was there so they wouldn't be alone while they waited to be found. Later that night, Elias placed the journal beside his notes on the cabin desk. He poured himself a cup of strong tea and stared at the map of the valley. At the stone circle. The swings clearing. The old creek trail. Each one had a story tied to it. And at the center of each one, a bear. The wind outside howled against the station. But Elias didn't feel unsettled. He felt watched. Not in fear. In memory. He picked up the pencil and began sketching. Not a drawing of the bear. Not this time. But of the valley itself. With symbols over each place he now knew had been visited. A mitten. A scarf. A ribbon. A broken swing. A circle of stones. And one word written beneath them all. Remembers. The next day, he hiked alone to the stone circle once more. No footprints this time. No Lila. Just snow and trees. He stood in the center and waited. Not expecting anything. Just listening. After some time, he noticed something carved freshly on one of the outer stones. It hadn't been there before. Rough. Simple. The last snow came quietly. No wind. No storm. Just a soft drifting of flakes like a final breath before silence. Elias watched from the ranger station as the sun cut low across the horizon. The snow no longer held its deep white sheen, it had begun to dull, melting slowly into patches, giving way to earth beneath. Winter was ending. But something remained. Lila hadn't spoken much since her final visit to the clearing. She went back to school in the nearby town. Her father returned to work. But each week, she sent Elias a letter. Sometimes with drawings. Sometimes with just a sentence. Each sealed in red wax, the way old letters were, as if they held more than words, as if they carried pieces of that forest. One letter read, "The swing still moves in my dreams." Another, "There's a new sapling by the creek." Same kind of tree. And most recently, he's not gone. He's just farther now. Elias kept them in a wooden box on his desk. The same box he used to hold the old journal and every drawing ever found related to the bear. He began to think of it as a kind of archive, not of fact, but of memory. Of presence. On the first true thaw day of spring, Elias returned to the stone circle once more. This time with tools. And gloves. And seeds. Not to search. Not to dig. But to plant. For every story he'd uncovered, every child who had waited, every scarf or mitten or name he'd traced, he planted something. Wildflowers. Shrubs. A sapling for each symbol. He didn't label them. Didn't put up signs. Just let the forest take them. To tend. To watch. To remember. And in the center, where the bear had always stood, he placed a new stone. It was smooth. Clean. He etched one word into it himself, using the same blade used to carve wood for trail signs. Here. Because here was where it always happened. Where time paused. Where fear softened. Where silence was never empty. And where being found didn't always mean being rescued, sometimes it just meant being seen. That night, he sat again on the ranger station porch. Same old chair. Same wool coat. The stars above blinked steady. And for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel the weight of watching. He just felt peace. He drifted off. And in his sleep, he dreamed. Of snow. Of trees. Of a red scarf fluttering from a low branch. And of a bear standing just beyond the swing. Watching. Always watching. When he awoke, it was morning. A warm breeze rustled the trees. And from the ridge, far in the distance, he thought, just for a moment, he saw something moving. Large. Dark. But fading into sunlight. Not gone. Just farther now. At the base of the porch steps, something waited. A single red flower. Fresh. Undisturbed. Elias picked it up. No note. No trail. Just presence. He smiled. Folded it into his journal. And wrote. Spring came. And he remembered. But legible. A single line. Until next winter. And next to it, the faintest shape. A paw print. Bigger than a man's hand. Etched clean. As if placed there gently. With care. Elias closed his eyes. The wind picked up through the pines. Carrying no words. Only memory. And he whispered. I'll keep the trail clear. The last snow came quietly. No wind. No storm. Just a soft drifting of flakes like a final breath before silence. Elias watched from the ranger station as the sun cut low across the horizon. The snow no longer held its deep white sheen, it had begun to dull, melting slowly into patches, giving way to earth beneath. Winter was ending. But something remained. Lila hadn't spoken much since her final visit to the clearing. She went back to school in the nearby town. Her father returned to work. But each week, she sent Elias a letter. Sometimes with drawings. Sometimes with just a sentence. Each sealed in red wax, the way old letters were, as if they held more than words, as if they carried pieces of that forest. One letter read. The swing still moves in my dreams. Another. There's a new sapling by the creek. Same kind of tree. And most recently, he's not gone. He's just farther now. Elias kept them in a wooden box on his desk. The same box he used to hold the old journal and every drawing ever found related to the bear. He began to think of it as a kind of archive, not of fact, but of memory. Of presence. On the first true thaw day of spring, Elias returned to the stone circle once more. This time with tools. And gloves. And seeds. Not to search. Not to dig. But to plant. For every story he'd uncovered, every child who had waited, every scarf or mitten or name he'd traced, he planted something. Wildflowers. Shrubs. A sapling for each symbol. He didn't label them. Didn't put up signs. Just let the forest take them. To tend. To watch. To remember. And in the center, where the bear had always stood, he placed a new stone. It was smooth. Clean. He etched one word into it himself, using the same blade used to carve wood for trail signs. Here. Because here was where it always happened. Where time paused. Where fear softened. Where silence was never empty. And where being found didn't always mean being rescued, sometimes it just meant being seen. That night, he sat again on the ranger station porch. Same old chair. Same wool coat. The stars above blinked steady. And for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel the weight of watching. He just felt peace. He drifted off. And in his sleep, he dreamed. Of snow. Of trees. Of a red scarf fluttering from a low branch. And of a bear standing just beyond the swing. Watching. Always watching. When he awoke, it was morning. A warm breeze rustled the trees. And from the ridge, far in the distance, he thought, just for a moment, he saw something moving. Large. Dark. But fading into sunlight. Not gone. Just farther now. At the base of the porch steps, something waited. A single red flower. Fresh. Undisturbed. Elias picked it up. No note. No trail. Just presence. He smiled. Folded it into his journal. And wrote. Spring came. And he remembered.